You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Home Field Apparel. And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 281st edition of Assembly Call Radio and our 924th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of March 9th, 2023. I am your host, Jared Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
All right, well, this week's banner moment is actually occurring right now. Because happening concurrently, as we launch tonight's episode of Assembly Call Radio, is the evening session of games at the Big Ten Tournament, and your Indiana Hoosiers still have yet to play their first Big Ten Tournament game. As you well know, there have been far too many Big Ten tournaments over the years that have included Indiana playing Thursday games, and sometimes even Wednesday games. In fact, since 2016, Indiana has only entered one Big Ten tournament seeded better than ninth. That was Archie's first season when the Hoosiers were the 6th seed. And simply put, Indiana cannot credibly expect to compete for a national championship when it's barely even been in the conversation for a conference championship for the past 7 seasons. But this season, Indiana took an important step forward in Mike Woodson's second season, earning the number 3 seed and a double bye in the Big Ten tournament for the first time since 2016. Now, did the Hoosiers need some late-season help to rise slightly above the Big Ten's muddled middle and finish tied for second, albeit still 3 games back from first? Yes, of course. But given the injury issues IU's faced this season and a Big Ten schedule that turned out to be comically challenging, you'll forgive an IU fan for not feeling apologetic about this seed. The bottom line is that finishing in the top 4 and getting the double bye is often an important indication of a Big Ten team that is ready to do some damage in March. Since the year 2000, when Michigan State won the Big Ten's last national title, 16 Big Ten teams have made the Final Four. Michigan State's made it 7 times, Wisconsin 3 times, Michigan twice, Ohio State twice, and Illinois and Indiana once each. Purdue and Iowa, of course, have both not made the Final Four since then. Of those 16 teams that have made it, all but 3 finished 4th or better in Big Ten regular season play. 2018 and 2013 Michigan were each number 5 seeds in the Big Ten tournament, while 2000 Wisconsin was the 8 seed. And 3 teams who were seeded 3rd in the Big Ten tournament, like IU is this year, went on to reach the Final Four. So what does all this mean? Ultimately, not a lot. A double bye guarantees nothing, as the 2013 and 2016 Hoosiers could tell you. But history suggests that the more often you can finish in the top 4 in the Big Ten, the more likely you are to make the NCAA tournament with a decent seed, and the more you give yourself legitimate at-bats to hit a March home run. So, enjoy this Thursday night off from having to worry about your Hoosiers, and let's hope Friday night's tip is the precursor to something special happening this month. All right, now let me introduce my co-hosts for this week. Coach Tonsoni is not here. He is actually in Chicago right now. As he just texted us, he said he's really going to enjoy this press conference after the Penn State-Illinois game. It's really cute. He's got his Heart Divided shirt on. So one side is the dark blue Penn State with shrews on the back, and the other side is orange with wood on it. So it's his Shrewswood shirt. You know, he doesn't know who to cheer for between Micah Shrewsbury and Brad Underwood, but he's just there soaking it all in. So, Coach, we hope that you enjoy yourself. But here with me, to my left, he is the Dusty May of Girls Youth Sports Coaching in Cincinnati, the president emeritus of the Robert Johnson Fan Club, and a featured bracketology expert on the field of 68.
The best of youth sports coaching, you know that we got 'em. When it comes to analytic trends, you know he can spot 'em. For first-class bracketology, if you want the top, you gotta go bottoms. If you want the top, you gotta go bottoms. If you want the top, you gotta go bottoms.
Andy, what is your bottoms line on the last week in Indiana basketball?
Well, it has been a little weird, to be honest. It's one of those where I'm not sure I know what day it is this week, which is kind of typical for me during this week. But not having IU play to this point in the Big Ten tournament, as you talked about, is a little bit weird. And as crazy as things have kind of gone in the Big Ten tournament so far, I mean, nothing clearly would be crazier than IU making a run to the finals of such a tournament. No matter how many upsets we've had thus far, I don't think anything would really compete with that. But now excited for things to tip off tomorrow. A lot of great basketball already so far today, and trying to watch the end of a couple other games here while we're doing that, with lots of bubble and bracketology implications along the way. But also nice to not have to answer a bunch of questions of, well, is IU, are they going to make it or are they not going to make it? It's so similar to the Big Ten tournament stuff. It's been nice to not have the will they or won't they questions, as opposed to how high can they get.
Yeah, Indiana's bracketology has almost been boring this year. It's like, yeah, we're just stuck there at a 4 seed, and boring in the best way possible, of course. Also here with us, he is a senior writer for The Big Lead, the president of the Race Thompson fan club, and a man who is already penciling San Diego State into his Final Four.
Analyzing players, finding every wrinkle. He hasn't ever hosted, never lifted a finger. He's got all the
Well, let me quickly add just one thing about this.
Dude just interrupted his own jingle.
All right, Mr. Rumors and Rants, do you have a rant for us this week?
By the way, I know that they're going to do this to me and stick San Diego State as a 5 and Indiana as a 4, so I have to sit through that. Do love San Diego State, but
San Diego State seemed like they were going to lose today, which would have avoided that situation.
I would have been honestly would have made me a little happy. They had a great season, but no, all my friends in San Diego root for San Diego State. So I have to sort of come along, but I'm not a big Aztec guy. Anyway, I feel like Michael Scott right now with the Big Ten tournament. I am ready to get hurt again. And so Indiana getting the double bye and potentially facing Maryland or a Minnesota team that all of a sudden can make shots is interesting. I do think the Hoosiers will win no matter who they play tomorrow. Semifinals will be interesting. Either Penn State or Northwestern, two teams that they just seemingly do not play well against. But it's nice to be in this position, to be able to have a double bye, get those guys some rest, regardless of the outcome. To be able to get some days off for this team to just relax and kind of recoup is a good thing. To not have to travel across the country to a Big Ten tournament somewhere else and be able to ride over to Chicago and maybe spend a little bit more relaxing time there is nice, and it'll be great to see these guys play. I know they're really motivated this year, even though they're already in the NCAA tournament. Last year, they were very motivated to basically play their way into the tournament. This year, I think they're motivated for different reasons, and that's because they think they can win it. And when you look at the path, the number 1 seed, they beat twice. Northwestern, I think that they came real close to beating twice, and had they played a little bit better, could have beat them. I think Penn State, they have something to prove against. You're just looking at how this sets up. They can win this. They absolutely can. And I don't even think they have to play their absolute best to win it. Whereas last year it felt like they had to be hitting on all cylinders to win. I think they can win this. And so it's a different feeling heading into this week in this tournament. We'll see what happens, because again, ready to get hurt again. But I think this team is in a much better position than we've seen them in years, not just from they're better this year standpoint, but from the matchups and the way the path is laid out. I think they can do it.
Okay, we'll remind you of this tomorrow when we're down 15 in the second half.
Oh, I'm going to be furious.
No, I agree with you. I actually do feel pretty good about how Indiana can do in this tournament. So here's what we have in store. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Big Ten tournament, react to what's already happened, kind of look at Indiana's path. And on our last show, we got a question about Xavier Johnson and how that whole situation unfolded. And so we want to tackle that and give you our thoughts on that as well. And then in segment 2, we'll talk a little bit more bracketology, kind of, tell you who you should be watching, who you should be rooting for as it pertains to Indiana and Indiana's potential seed in the NCAA tournament. And then we've got a lot of questions in our mailbag, and so we're going to hit that as well. All of that coming this week on Assembly Call Radio. But first, let's talk about our presenting sponsor.
Home field apparel, wear one for the team.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this edition of the Assembly Call, just like all shows on the Back Home Network, presented by our friends at Home Field Apparel. where they have the largest collection of vintage IU apparel that you will find anywhere, with beloved logos like 2 different versions of the Bison and so many more. But look, here's the great thing about Home Field Apparel. They're not just about vintage logos anymore. Now they're about creating timely shirts like this one, which I hope many of you ordered it. Can you see it?
Pull it back. Pull it back.
Well, it's hard to do. Okay, I can't do that and talk into the microphone at the same time, but we'll try. Here. So you can see.
There you go.
There you go. That's right. The women's basketball Big Ten champions, they made a shirt commemorating it. It just came in. So I look forward to wearing that shirt. But that's what Home Field does now. You know, they create timely shirts, like they created the awesome shirt, you know, for the Michael Penix play when we beat Penn State. And so Home Field, they just continue to expand. Not just the designs they're putting on there, but I also ordered my dad, Colorado University, a quarter zip, which is really nice. They've got hats now. So Home Field Apparel, they just keep expanding the schools that they offer items for and the different types of items. And what's great is no matter what they put out, it's really comfortable material. It's washable. The colors last. It's just great stuff. And so whether you're trying to shop for stuff for the spring or summer or start planning ahead for next winter, they've got something for everybody. So we want you to go to homefieldapparel.com, use our promo code HOME, HOME, and you will get 15% off your first order. That's promo code HOME, HOME, at homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. All right. Let's start out, guys, talking about X, because that's something we haven't really had a chance. There hasn't been an episode of Assembly Call Radio since all that kind of went down. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on it. I talked with Scott about it on the most recent edition, the crossover edition of Crimson Cast. And so I'll, share my thoughts here, but also talked about it there. So make sure that you listen to that. But Ryan, I'm curious, we'll start with you, kind of your thoughts on how that situation was handled, at least to the extent that we know about how it was handled, and how you think it kind of lays out here for the present and future for Indiana.
Just the latest that he's going to come back? Try and come back?
Yeah,
I think that. Well, I was just wondering exactly which part you were talking about. I think that they waited as long as possible to see if he could come back. I think if you asked X, he would have tried to play in January. But the people around him were saying, "You're not healthy yet. You're not healthy enough to play." And could he have played at a much lower percentage than I think was right for him to play at? Yes, and he probably could play at a very reduced percentage right now. But I think the people around him decided there's no benefit to that. And also, it may not help Indiana a whole lot to have a very diminished version of X trying to get healthy minutes wise and trying to get, game ready this late in the season. If he had come back in early February and ramped up slowly, maybe you hit your stride in March. But the fact that he had to be out so long made this kind of inevitable, that he was either going to go and be gone, or he was going to try and come back. And that was really the thing. And I will say, I heard for, I would say, a month straight that if he didn't come back this year, he was just going to go ahead and move on to the next level. A lot of his friends are going to be gone. The team looks like, just on the surface, unless some guys show up next year, is going to be much less competitive next year. Would have been difficult for him to go through that, because he had kind of been part of building this back up the last 2 years. And so I had heard for a while that it looked like if he wasn't healthy enough, he was just gonna take off. But now it appears he's definitely going to try and come back, and he's going to petition for an extra year, and he has a chance to do that. And he would certainly be Indiana's best lead player next year. I don't think there's any question about that, if healthy. So, in some ways it makes sense. I'm sure there's going to be some NIL money for him, and being the face of Indiana basketball next year would be a big thing for him. So we'll see. I do think they waited as long as possible, and it got to a point where people were like, well, is he ever gonna come back? And it got too late in the season for him to build up a minutes, a pile of minutes behind him that would make it so he could go full bore in March. So it makes sense to a lot of people. The only question to me was whether or not he was going to take off or come back, and it appears he wants to try and come back at least.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, all things being equal, like if he were healthy, I would rather him have played this year to see what we could maximize this year. But, given again, we don't really know what his
game
health
ready.
Is. Yeah.
Yeah. Even if he's fully healthy, he's not game ready,
Yeah.
You saw it when Race came back. Race was healthy, and it took him weeks to get his legs under him. And there's just not that much time left.
Which, by the way, Race looked really good against Michigan.
He really did.
If he's back to being Race, that is a huge bump for this team.
Race looked, for the first time to me, looked like last year's Race.
Like
for
Race.
the first time
like
all
pre-Big
season.
Ten tournament last year's Race.
Yes. The
Totally.
whole stretch of the Big Ten, pretty much, until the tournament.
So, Andy, one more thing on the X issue, because I think look, in reality, X is a really good player. He's an All Big Ten level point guard. So having him play this year for a short period of time to help this team, or having him for a full season next year, it's a win-win. Either way, it's a positive. And so obviously, we hope everything works out with the waiver and all of that stuff. Was there any chance for Indiana to get like a seeding bump if X did come back, looked somewhat like himself for 3 or 4 games? Would the committee take that into account? Like, hey, they just got this guy back. Maybe they're even better. That could bump Indiana up to a 3, or is that a pipe dream? Was it a pipe dream?
I don't know that would have made a huge amount of difference. I think you'd had to have him back enough games for it really to matter. It's a little bit of the opposite of what you're going to see with UCLA over the next couple of days. That they lose Jalen Clark, who's one of their better players, not the best player, but everybody now is trying to figure out, well, does that cost UCLA a seed line? Well, you're not going to get a huge opportunity to see what they look like without him. And really at this point with IU, I don't know that hearkening back to what they looked like at the beginning of the season when he was healthy is reflective of what they would be when he came back anyway. So I'm not really, I tend to think not. I think the consideration given is a lot more for, maybe top 2 type player on the team. And I just don't know that you could have shown enough in a limited amount of time that would say, hey, this really elevates what they are. And so I don't think it would have made a difference. And I think that, ultimately ties into some of the decision-making as well. And it's what Ryan said of like, how long do you really have to be able to get him in game shape? We kept talking about that as the season went along. It's like, well, how many games can you get him to help him ramp up so that he can be ready for the tournament? And I think the clock just kind of ran out on that to a certain extent. And and then you also reach a point where both as the player and whatever else, it's like, okay, if I'm not 100%, what does that look like? Am I putting myself at risk? Am I doing whatever? And quite honestly, the option for him to come back is certainly dependent upon the waiver, but was really never anything that entered into my mind as one of the options. You know what I mean? Like if you had said, well, these, here's a couple things that are going to happen, I wouldn't have thought that was true. And I do think it's a potential help for, giving the team a little bit of stability or a foundation next year when you're going to lose a lot. Certainly, improve by getting guys out of the portal. And IU has been fortunate in recent seasons to be able to take advantage of some guys who coaching changes, they got out of their commitment and were able to swoop in and get some of those guys. But I think it at least gives you a building block that you know what to expect from them. Other than that, you got a lot of guys who you might be excited about and think can maybe make a leap, but you don't really know. And so in this case, at least it gives you a piece to start with, and certainly having a strong point guard is a great place to start in college basketball.
Brett said, does Xavier coming back make it more likely that IU can attract a quality big? And I would say yes for 2 reasons. One, because a lot of attention that was going to have to be spent trying to find an experienced point guard now doesn't have to be spent if Xavier Johnson is coming back, because you've got him and you've got a guy in Gabe Cups that you believe can be that 10 to 15 minute guy off the bench. You don't want to have to thrust him into a starting position. So you don't have to spend that time. And then also, I think there's some pretty obvious videos from the end of last season to show any potential big man of what it's like to play with Xavier Johnson, especially any big man who can catch a lob. I would think that would be pretty attractive to a guy like that, to play with a guy like X. So yes, I do think it does. And it allows, people who are in the portal and want to go to a team that's going to be competitive to look and say, okay, they lost a lot. There's a lot of minutes there. But this is now a coach that has made 2 straight NCAA tournaments. You've got an all Big Ten level point guard. You've got some talented younger players ready to step up. This is a place that I can go help continue to succeed. And so I think it does a lot of those things for next year's team, which is nice.
One last thing on the transfer idea, especially a veteran transfer that's looking for a running buddy or something like that. I think you're right, Jared. I think it does help because this team coming back, it's not that Indiana won't be competitive next year, but it's looking like a young middle of the Big Ten squad that's building towards something further down the road. But if you bring back your senior point guard and you can get maybe another scorer or a big, and I think looking at the roster, you might need a big and a stretch four or two bigs or something just because of the lack of depth there. It does, I think, help, but you gotta, I would say, I don't think X would be coming back if he didn't think Indiana could be competitive next year.
Right.
And so maybe he thinks that they're going to be able to get, another big, another wing, something, to help. Because you got to think of not only additions, but potential subtractions as well.
And he's seen the returning guys up close, Malik Renew and, some of these young guys, CJ Gunn, Caleb Banks, that you would, expect to be able to take jumps in their second season. So, look, again, I would have much rather had him healthy this season. Let's maximize what's here this season. That didn't happen. So the next, kind of the next step or the next option is still a really good one with him coming back next year, which, as Ryan said, it's kind of shaping up to be a bit of a transition year where you just kind of look, let's stay competitive in the Big Ten. Let's make the NCAA tournament, keep the momentum going before we can get some big recruiting classes in 2024-25. But also you get enough impact transfers, it could be better than that. So
yeah,
we wait and see.
And one thing is, I think that people, the freshmen coming in next year are more like freshmen. There's no Jalen Hushafino. There's no, Malik Renew is even probably, I know he had a downturn during the year, but he's going to be real good next year. I think he's, probably with X coming back, I think Renew becomes your second best player. I would have thought without X, he's probably your best player. But the guys coming in are going to be role players to start, I think. I think it would be a shock if either of those guys is starting, Cups or Newton. Doesn't mean they're not going to be good players, but I think that there's going to be a transition to college basketball that didn't exist for Jalen Javino.
Right.
Yeah, they're more along the track of like a Caleb Banks, CJ Gunn.
Exactly.
Maybe give or take a little bit, more playing time here and there, but generally speaking, they're more like those guys. And you've got Galloway, so you've got some, at least ball handling and kind of playmaking. You've got some guys there. It's definitely getting some bigs and shooters and all those kinds of things.
Yep. Okay, coming up on Assembly Call Radio in our second segment, we are going to have some reactions to the Big Ten tournament, look ahead to Indiana's potential path, and then while Andy's here, we'll talk some bracketology. We know Indiana will make the field. What's the ceiling and floor in their seat at this point? Who should we be cheering for? We'll discuss. Stick with us. All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to all the chat mobbers out there. Good to see you all there. It's always nice to have you here on a Thursday evening. Nice to see Megan popping her head up from her busy time to come join us. Always happy to have you, Megan.
By the way, the next matchup it's either going to be Maryland, who they played terribly against, but it was at Maryland, which is an incredibly difficult place to play, or Minnesota, and they'll finally get to face Dawson Garcia.
Hey, very nice. Does Woody just retire to a cigar bar and let Coach Yaw handle the Minnesota game since he did it the first time? Or do you think Woody hangs around for that one?
I'm going to say no, but
yeah. Cigar
maybe
bar
that would have been a little bit less tense and a little bit more of a walk in the park than maybe.
Yeah, I like where they're at right now. I think the revenge factor against Maryland and Penn State and Northwestern all is going to motivate them. I mean, Northwestern, those are two games they should have won. I went back and watched the first one, and they should have won.
They just played like ass in the first one.
They did. And the second one was they played terribly in the second half. Or I mean the first half. So
no, I like
Penn State's playing as well as anybody in the league right now, though.
Yes, I know, and
they just got hard.
Offense,
they got tough matchups from an IU perspective. It's like, and I mean, from a lot of people, like, who do you put on Pickett? And
who guarded him the first time?
Nobody.
I mean,
we guarded.
Well, I mean, no, but who did they run out there against him? Was
I honestly don't remember.
I don't remember.
Geronimo played some in that game. I don't really. I honestly don't
That's
remember.
right, Geronimo.
That's definitely not one that I'll be rewatching.
No.
No, and I
But-
think that again, if that game happens at Assembly Hall, I still think they lose. I just don't think they get run off the floor like they did. But yeah, I mean, if Penn State's hitting threes, you're toast. I think that's just okay. Well, that's it. Like if they hit 13 threes or whatever it is, you're gonna lose anyway. Like it doesn't matter. So, but I do think that
they're just the kind of like free flowing offense. I feel like that IU does not deal well with.
it's the same as Iowa.
Yes.
It's basically the same as Iowa.
100%.
And they just straight line drive Indiana to death in that game, and that opened up the threes. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yep. All right, we'll save those takes.
Okay.
We'll talk about them here coming up in segment 2. Here we go.
What's going on? It's Christian Wofford. What's the only thing better than an epic buzzer beater? Celebrating it with friends afterwards. Join my guys Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the assembly call after every IU game. Go Hoosiers.
Alrighty, thank you, Christian. Christian Watford, the co-host of the excellent new podcast Ball from Assembly Hall with Derek Elston, which I have very much enjoyed listening to, and I think we're going to try and get those guys on here in the offseason to talk more IU hoops. But definitely go listen to that. It's called Ball from Assembly Hall. It's part of, I don't remember the name of the network, but it's a network of all Big Ten shows. They've got a show for each team that has ex-players talking on it. It's a nice kind of way to get some unique insight from guys who played in the league. So very interesting. I'm Jared Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. And this is Assembly Call Radio, and we're about to talk about the Big Ten tournament, about to talk about bracketology. But before we do that, since it's Thursday night here, our main segment brought to you by our new sponsor this season, Trueblood Real Estate, Jim Trueblood, the founder of Trueblood Real Estate, a longtime friend of mine, actually the first guy I ever went to an NCAA tournament game with. And he's been helping people in Indiana buy and sell real estate properties since 2006. And starting this season, Trueblood Real Estate, they became the exclusive and official real estate partner of IU Athletics with a team of talented agents to serve you in Bloomington and throughout Indiana. So if you're looking to buy or sell real estate in Indiana, you need to experience the Trueblood advantage. Go to truebloodre.com to learn more. That's truebloodre.com and tell them the Assembly Call sent you. All right, so let's talk Big Ten tournament. Andy, as we talk right now, I believe the Minnesota-Maryland game is tipping off, and Minnesota obviously has been the worst team in the conference. Maryland has been excellent, but mostly at home and not away from home. Is there any reason to cheer for or to not want Minnesota to win this game?
If there is, I'm not sure what it would be. They'd be playing their third game in 3 days.
I know.
It feels, I mean, for a team that doesn't have a ton of depth or at least a ton of quality depth, yeah, that feels like the.
I guess it would just be if you believe Maryland is just so incompetent away from home, but I don't think they're quite that bad.
I mean, they're close. There are only 2 road wins this year at Minnesota and at Louisville. So do with that what you will. But no. So I think certainly would be good to that. You do see teams get hot in these, but I think if you had your choice, you'd probably take Minnesota on third game in 3 days, but 8-2 Maryland early, so it may not. May not happen. May not happen.
What are your early takes from Big Ten tournament action so far? We've had 5 games, and I believe the underdog has won every one.
All 5.
Ohio State is on a very predictable 2-game winning streak after Mark Titus moved to Chicago, and the Big Ten tournament is in Chicago. Of course, Ohio State would go on a run. Michigan got blasted by Rutgers in a must-win game for both teams. Any big takeaways for you from what you've seen so far? Any surprises? Anything stand out?
I mean, I think there's been a lot of NCAA tournament implications in the games and kind of how some of the teams have played in the face of those has been interesting. If you start with the Wisconsin game, I wouldn't be completely stunned to see them make it, but it would. They'd be the highest ranked team. Yeah, they'd be the highest ranked team in the net to ever make it at this point. They just have enough quality wins, and they won at Marquette. They won at Iowa. Like, if the committee really values those, there's a chance. I think it's unlikely. I think they're a game or 2 under 500 against the top 3 quadrants. So it seems unlikely, but just really didn't, it mounted that huge comeback late, but just really struggled out of the gate. And that gave Ohio State some confidence. They carried into today. Rutgers, Michigan got off to a really good start, and Rutgers could have easily folded. But man, I tell you, watching that game, you could hear their coaching staff, you could hear the bench, like just kind of willing these guys to get back in the game. And once they got it, they were rolling, and Michigan was one of a billion for the first part of the second half, and just were, it was, quite honestly, it looked like Rutgers teams that IU has played at times, where they just get rolling and hitting everything they throw up and whatever else. But I just thought was really impressed by the coaching staff kind of knowing what their team needed. Peichel was, at the front of that, but just really knowing what they needed to kind of pull them through when things weren't going their way at the beginning of the game. And, seemed to kind of push the right buttons. And then, Penn State, Illinois, Penn State's playing as well as anybody in the league right now. They've got a lot of confidence. They win in close games. Certainly have proven to have Illinois' number. And Illinois and Michigan, to me, very similar. Tons of talent, a little bit head-scratching what they do, but their in-game decision-making and basketball IQ type stuff is not very good.
Been there.
Just their understanding of what's a good shot at a given point in the game. Just thought Illinois panicked way too early. And I think Michigan did a little bit of that as well in their game, where, you've got the talent to get yourself back in the game, but just had pieces that didn't really play well together unless everything was going great. And then everything was fine, but it seemed like both teams that once a little adversity hit really struggled to rebound, both within games and from game to game.
Ryan, if you were a Michigan fan, how worried would you be about the future of the Juwan Howard era? Because as we've gotten further from the John Beilein era, his teams are struggling more and more, even though there's still a lot of talent on the rosters.
First of all, what a weird year that Michigan and Wisconsin could be out of the tournament when they're you pencil them in every year at this point in the Big Ten.
Greg Garden, Juwan Howard in the NIT. Let's go.
Michigan, North Carolina, baby. Calling the final right now. No, I would.
Yeah, because North Carolina is going to show up motivated for the NIT.
Yeah, why not? Could finally take home a banner under.
Caleb Love shooting fall away 35-footers the entire game. That sounds like
the quality of that win really dropped for Indiana, didn't it?
Yeah, no kidding.
No, if I were Michigan, I'd be worried. I think the problem with Juwan Howard is you have to mix and match your recruiting classes. And you have to recruit talent, but you also have to recruit program players. And that's building a program, not a team. And it feels like he's built teams, not programs, and not a program. And, you have enough guys who think they're the alpha, then it's way too many cooks in the kitchen. You got to have a hierarchy on your team of who gets what when, who does what when, and whose value to the team is understood. And it just feels like, you could say Hunter Dickinson should take the game-winning shot, but Jet Howard's also there. But then, there's other guys that,
I'd give it to Kobe Buffkin.
I mean, yeah, Buffkin, Doug, McDaniel, they have a whole group of guys who feel like individual players, and it's never been a team. And so, yeah, I'd be worried. I would not be shocked if, a pro team comes calling if he looks, and
he might be smart to jump before things get too bad.
Look. Yeah. So
yeah.
But then again, maybe he's Harbaugh who teases that every year and then winds up staying. I don't know, but it just doesn't feel like a well-constructed program at the moment. It feels like they're getting players. It just doesn't feel like it's put together well, and he's not alone in that, style of program. But Michigan has always felt a little bit different. Like they've been able to have those program guys who are hitting threes against you in March and just piss you off to no end. And I don't really see those guys on that roster right now.
I mean, has there been a Big Ten coach in the last 20 years better at getting and developing those guys than John Beilein?
Probably not.
Honestly,
yeah.
I know.
It's that or it was like Bo Ryan. Those were the two guys that just always had these guys who you didn't hear from for 3 years. And then his seniors are just burying threes in a key situation. And you're like, when did he get that guy? And it's like 4 years ago. He's just been slowly biding his time.
Yeah. And I think when you contrast what, I'm sure Coach would love to be here to have this conversation. But when you contrast what Micah Shrewsbury's done at Penn State, he's getting, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. It's like they play well together. They have a defined style. They share the ball well, and you can tell they just enjoy, being out there and competing with one another. And you just don't get that from some of these teams that are more talented. I mean, he's just overachieving with what he, with what he has, because he's found ways to make the pieces work. And with Shrewsbury's case, he's done it through, bringing in some grad transfers and trying to surround them with pieces and things like that. But I just think you see him getting more out of those guys than the talent would suggest. And I feel like Illinois has been pretty mercurial this year, and certainly Michigan feels like they've gotten less out of them than what you would expect based on the level of talent on the roster.
Well, Ryan's down here glowing in the bottom screen. He just shared something in the chat. You wanna share with the folks what has you so happy?
Oh, Tim Miles beat Steve Alford today. I always knew I liked that guy.
Is San Jose State, are they going to the tournament?
No, they've been amazing turnaround from him, though. I think they won their 20th game today. I believe they said on the broadcast they had won a total of 20 games the last 3 years. And
wow.
They have to win the conference tournament to get it.
Yeah, they have to win the conference tournament to get it. They were the 5 seed. But they may have knocked Alford's crew out of the tournament, actually. But they won 20 games. I think Miles was the coach of the year. I think they even had the player of the year in the conference too, which is somewhat odd for a 5 seed. But I mean, this feels like the best time to bring up, with Boeheim retiring, having to have Tom Crean on talking about in studio talking about Jim Boeheim retiring. I was like, oh my God.
Eamon Brennan, an IU
I was
guy.
like, just rip the TV off the wall and throw it.
Eamon Brennan, an IU guy, had a great tweet about Jim Boeheim. The quote was well, hey, you always knew where you stood with Jim Boeheim. And Eamon quote tweeted, he said, this is the kind of thing they said about Livia Soprano at her wake. And it's, if you've watched The Sopranos, that is a great reference and 100% true.
It was a great line.
Yeah.
Okay, so last question about the Big Ten tournament. Obviously, Indiana is going to face Maryland or Minnesota. I think there are reasons, even though Indiana struggled in both those games against those teams in their buildings, winning one, losing one, I think there are reasons to feel good about either one of those matchups for Indiana, especially if you get Maryland away from home or if you get Minnesota on 2 straight days. So fair to say it will be a disappointment if Indiana loses tomorrow night. But then, Andy, as you look ahead to Saturday, Indiana is going to face the winner of Northwestern and Penn State. Now, normally you would say, well, obviously you want to face the 10 seed and not the 2 seed. But given how the 3 games against those teams went, Indiana lost all of them. 2 competitive games to Northwestern and 1 decidedly non-competitive game to Penn State. Who would you prefer to play Saturday if you had your choice? I actually think it's kind of easy.
Yeah, I just look at how Penn State is playing right now, and I have no idea who would guard Jalen Pickett, so I think I just automatically go with Northwestern. I think
I would too.
Yeah,
honestly.
Now, you could probably make the same argument about who do you have that you feel like can really contain Boo Booey at this point, and IU has not.
Well, it depends. Are they calling push-offs or no at the tournament?
That's a fair question. But I mean, they really, in large parts of both games, IU has played well, but in large parts of both games as well, I mean, Northwestern has gotten whatever they wanted offensively.
Yeah.
And so I don't think either one feels like a particularly great matchup. Obviously, you got a whole bunch of teams on their side of the bracket that they've not played well against, which is why it was so important to get the help that they did on Sunday in order to be able to, win some, to be seated where they were in the tournament, because they didn't have a lot of those tiebreakers against some of those teams. But yeah, I'd be inclined to say Northwestern. Yeah, I mean, you'd also be, facing Penn State on their 3rd game in 3 days as well. They rely a lot on just a few guys, but I think the style that they play is would give IU some trouble.
Isn't it interesting that we're the 3 seed? We're the 3 seed. And we are guaranteed in our first 2 games in the Big Ten tournament to not play a team that we beat this season.
Yes.
All the teams that we could play are teams
which, given how hard the schedule was, is pretty darn hard to believe, really.
No.
It's so strange.
We also had kind of a schizophrenic season if you look at wins and losses, and you don't take into account like, injuries and all that where it makes more sense, but swept by Iowa, but swept Purdue. Like, I split with Michigan State, which they're probably better than me. I mean, I know that, again, that game, there was a lot more going on there than just the game. Swept by Northwestern, swept Illinois. Like, it's, for a normal year, you would be looking at that and just like, what? But one at the barn, but
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a weird mix.
Oh, that's right. We won the Minnesota game. I keep forgetting that. We did win the Minnesota game, so I take that back.
Yeah.
We could potentially play Minnesota.
That's when we came on after the show, too, and we're like, hey, win is a win at the barn. Like, we were very apologetic for the win there.
Yeah, that's right.
But no, it is interesting if you look down the line. I mean, to get swept by Iowa this year is just what?
But we've got a type. There's definitely a matchup we struggle with.
Free-flowing open offenses really give this team trouble.
Yes.
That's even why Minnesota really, I think at times has given IU that. They kind of play that way with they hit all those threes toward the end of the game. I think it was last year or 2 years ago when they had the huge lead and let them come back. It was just kind of wide open doing that. You got a big guy who can step out and shoot, some of those things. Like, yeah, there's definitely a type that gives IU trouble. That's for sure.
Beat Wisconsin, but like that's just not normal for IU. Like it's, I don't know. Usually, I mean, a year like this, you would think they'd split Illinois, on the road, but they beat Illinois by like 15 on the road, almost 20. It's been a weird. It really has been a weird year if you look at Indiana's results down the list.
Well,
but that's true about the entire Big Ten. I mean,
it is. It is. And that's why a lot of the national folks still think Indiana is kind of a dark horse Final Four pick because we can beat good teams. We've shown that. Hopefully we can avoid some of the bad matchups. And speaking of that, Andy, let's transition into a little bit of bracketology talk. I mean, there's only so much that we can talk about, and I highly recommend everybody check Inside the Hall where Andy posts his brackets now. You've been posting there for 6-7 years now, I think. Then you're also doing a field of 68. So obviously this stuff can change, but are there any updates on kind of what you think the ceiling and floor is for IU seed? And are there any teams that you think Indiana fans should be cheering for or against based on the fact that it could help Indiana seeding or because it's a potential matchup that Indiana wants to avoid in the first or second round?
Yeah, in terms of well, I guess I'll kind of try to take the order of the things that you said. So, yeah, I'll have projections up Friday, probably late morning at Inside the Hall, and then probably not again till Sunday. And we'll do it then. And then fielding the 68. I was on the last show that I'll be on today, but definitely would encourage everybody to check it out tomorrow as well. We'll be on 5 o'clock as usual. And then I think they're doing a selection show of it kind of as they reveal the brackets and things like that. So it's been awesome to do that the last couple of years. A really good group of bracketologists. Rocco Miller has been on with Alex on Podcast on the Brink before. So probably a voice that people have heard. He's awesome. Lucas Harkins and Brad Wachtel were the other bracketologists. And then some of the 3-man weave guys and Greg Waddell, who's a huge Big Ten fan as the host. So it's been a cool experience. Those guys have a good thing going over there for sure. So in terms of ceiling for the seed, I struggle to think that IU can get to a 3, which will probably feed into my answer to your last question here in a second. I think there's a combination of things why I say that. One is they got to leapfrog a few teams. 2 is by the time they would get enough wins to do that, it feels like it's past the time when the committee is really doing a whole lot. So by the same token, I don't know that there's a huge chance of dropping to a 5 either. I think as of now, I had them as my second 4 seed. I mean, maybe if it's Minnesota and you lose to Minnesota, maybe there's a little bit more ability to drop in that scenario. But somebody's also got to come and catch you at that point as well. So I think the range is a 3 to a 5. I think the 4 is by far the most likely outcome in terms of where things are now. And then as far as, who to root for or against, as you look at the teams that are in front of IU on the 3 line, I'm just using bracket matrix right now, although this is pretty similar to what I have. You've got Gonzaga, Marquette, who almost lost today, but I don't think would have dropped far enough that IU would pass them. They won the Big East regular season, and now they play UConn tomorrow. That's not going to be a bad loss at all. Kansas State, they're playing now, I believe, playing TCU. And then Tennessee is probably the lowest rated 3 seed on there. I actually had them as a 4. I had UConn just in front of them. They've got I don't know that they've been as good as some of the numbers would suggest over the course of the year. They lost to Kai Ziegler, their point guard, and how that affects their seed is yet to be seen. And then around IU, you've got UConn in front of them, who I think has a better resume overall based on some of the things they were able to accomplish early in the season and been playing well again of late. And then Xavier's right there by IU. They had to come back to beat DePaul. IU's got the head-to-head over them, so they're probably, if they're in front of IU, it's not by a lot. And then Virginia kind of just behind. So I don't know that there's a lot of ability to leapfrog those teams, because I think you probably could if you really took into account all the results of the weekend, but we kind of know that that's not often the way that it goes. But like I said, I also am not sure that, maybe a Miami or a San Diego State could really come and catch and leapfrog IU. San Diego State, I think they both won close games today. I'm just not sure that they'll do enough to catch IU even if they would lose. So again, that's kind of why I said the 4 is most likely. And then to your last question, in terms of like early matchups, if you assume there are 4, the current 5 seeds are Miami, San Diego State, St. Mary's, which I know gives everybody PTSD again, which you were giving me a hard time about on Twitter today, and Iowa State. I don't know that Miami's got really good guards, and pretty versatile. Jim Larinaga is a really good coach. I think that would be an interesting one. San Diego State just can kind of grind you down defensively. Always a tough team.
But they're from San Diego, so they're soft.
Weak.
Yeah. And
They're big too.
St. Mary's, there's a lot of times that the committee tries to, certainly in the first round, tries to stay away from rematches. So I may have, I don't know how, certainly in the first round game they wouldn't have one. We'll see how that goes. They need the Gonzaga game plan from the WCC title game, because they just ran them off the floor. And then Iowa State's been really up and down. They own Baylor. They're now 3-0 against Baylor after they beat them today in the Big 12. They were higher than IU in the top 16 reveal, and then proceeded to lose, I think, 4 games in a row, but they've righted the ship here a little bit late. TCU's also in that mix of there. They've had some injuries this season, so they lost a few games and are in that 6 range. And then you got Kentucky, Texas A&M, maybe Creighton in the 6. Like if they work themselves up to a 5, could maybe see that with more one of the SEC schools perhaps than Creighton. So I know everybody will say, well, the selection committee, if they can, they're going to find a way to have IU and Kentucky play. I'm not saying it might not work out that way if they do get up to a 5, but it will likely be because that's the way that the bracketing rules work, especially with as many Big 12 teams at the top as there are. There's a lot of those rules that come into play and different things like that. So I don't know that there's anybody to really root for or against, just because I'm not sure there's a lot of movement that IU is gonna have at this stage of things.
When do you get your final bracket? Like when do you turn in the very final one?
Usually it's due. I don't think the guy at the Bracket Matrix, he usually sends an email with kind of instructions and deadlines and stuff like that. You can send it in as early as you want. I mean, realistically, I think a lot of times you're waiting, especially if there's like a bid thief scenario. I feel like a couple years ago there was somebody in the American conference title game that wouldn't have gotten in if they otherwise. So you kind of had to wait on that a little bit. But I think the American and the Big Ten are the last 2 of the day. And I think one of them that used to be the last day, I want to say the A10 may have shifted to finish up on Saturday. But so it's usually late afternoon, Sunday, kind of whenever you want. If you want to wait for the Big Ten game to be over, knowing that the committee is not going to do anything different with it, you're welcome to. But it'll usually be then. There's a couple other final games. I think the Ivy League is Sunday, and maybe one other typical one bid league. So you got to wait till those are done, so you make sure that those are correct.
So that Indiana Ohio State Big Ten tournament title game is really going to cause some problems on
really
timing, huh?
Really well.
Andy, quick question: how many bids have been stolen so far? Do you think?
None, really. Well, it's kind of hard to say. I mean, there's obviously the major conferences are still early enough where you have teams alive who could fit that bill, but they're only in the quarterfinals at this point, so it's not really anything to worry about.
But of the small conferences,
biggest opportunity for that in the small conferences is in Conference USA. If somebody other than Florida Atlantic wins, then they're gonna take one from somebody, because Florida Atlantic's pretty safely in at this point, and they very well could lose. North Texas is good and has typically performed well in that tournament because it's kind of in their backyard a bit. But that's really the only one of the single bid leagues who that's a possibility for. Now there may be some others that somebody's there, but even like the A10, nobody. VCU won the regular season, but they wouldn't make it if they didn't win the tournament.
Gotcha.
So So really just Conference USA is the one that bubble teams will be watching pretty intently. And then whoever else might emerge from some of these other leagues. So, Ohio State, if you will. But Big East is pretty close to not having any of those left with who's won so far, at least.
All right. Well, thank you for the updates, Andy. Follow Andy on Twitter. Follow Coach Tonsoni and the guys at Delphi Bracketology. And, of course, our friend Mike DeCourcy and Galen from Crimson Cast. All four of you guys do a great job with the brackets. We feel really lucky to be able to have so much insight from all of you guys. So follow all them. Gobble up everything that they're putting out there here for the next few days, and then we'll find out what the actual bracket is on Sunday. Do us a favor, Chris Reynolds. We're counting on you. All right, coming up here on the assembly call, it is time to turn our attention to our mailbag. We got a lot of good questions from our community members, and we also put out a call to Twitter for the random and ridiculous question of the day and got some fun ones there. We'll answer those questions next. Stick with us. All right, Andy, so I have to ask you for the beautiful, wonderful woman who I share a house with and children with. Where's Texas A&M in the bracketing?
I think I had I want to say I had them as the last 6 seed today. They're right in that 6-7 range, which is really a testament to how well they played in the in the SEC. They've had some big wins there. Obviously, beating Alabama at the end was huge for them, but they really didn't do it. It took a couple of bad losses in the non-conference, but really came together over the course of the season. Around when we started doing Fielding the 68, probably early February, I want to say, I think I joked that Buzz Williams was going to have to get his dossier ready again like he did last year so he could state his case as to why. But it turned out not necessary, that they've played really, really well. And they're safe.
Good,
I don't know that they could get up to a 5. I think they're probably
good
6-7 range. I wouldn't imagine.
That's all we're trying to avoid. We just want to avoid a second-round matchup between Indiana and Texas A&M. So
absolutely,
if we can,
your sanity.
Yes, if we can avoid that, then we will be good. Okay, big news with Patrick Ewing being let go.
Finally,
that was. I don't know that you really had any choice in that one. I mean, I get the whole, his status within that program historically, but man, just the on-court product had been, short of that one Big East tournament run, which I think was the COVID year.
Mm-hmm. They were dreadful.
Just god awful every single year.
Okay. Which Big Ten coach did they go after?
Which Big Ten coach should they go after?
No, there's always a guy from the major conferences thrown in for a job like Georgetown, a historical, there's always guys. I'm just wondering, what name do you think is going to pop up? Whether or not they'd go or not, what name do you think pops up? One name will pop up.
Shrewsbury?
That's what.
But not. Yeah, but I think that they would want someone a little bit more proven. Aren't they going to?
I will bet Shaheen Holloway's name gets thrown around.
Yeah, but he just went to Seton Hall.
I know, but Seton Hall is one of the worst. Seton Hall is one of the worst jobs facility-wise in the country. So I think
that's also his alma mater. He may only go there for 1 year. I don't know.
I don't see that.
I bet his name gets thrown around. I'm not talking about who's going to go there.
Where's Pitino going to go? Where's he going to end up?
He has let everybody know he is open for business. I think St. John's and Pitino is the.
That sounds.
Mark Titus said that.
What's a better job, St. John's or Georgetown?
I think it depends who you are. Pitino playing at the Garden, it's St. John's. But I don't know, man. I
kind of feel like Georgetown is.
I do too.
They've been so bad for so long.
It's like devalued the product. But they were. Here's the thing.
I still have in my head what they used to be, which is probably unfair to.
And here's
back in Jim Boeheim's Big East.
Between Georgetown and St. John's, Georgetown has been good far more recently. Has had a good product.
Yeah, gosh, St. John's.
It's been decades.
That's even like before us. Like they had a
Yeah.
little brief thing
Like-
when Felipe Lopez went there.
Yeah.
And outside of that, they've done nothing.
But I mean, they were. Wasn't Georgetown like a 2 seed in 2013 or something?
Yeah,
like
when they
that?
had like Hibbert and
yeah, they've had
Well,
some
that was
decent
before
teams.
that. The year they had like Otto Porter was when they
yeah,
lost
he
to
was
Florida.
decent.
Florida
Who's
Gulf
the other guy?
Coast.
Jeff Green. Is that who was he there?
Yeah, he went there.
Jeff Green.
but,
Yeah, they had
the
John
Otto
Thompson
Porter
III
year-
had some good teams.
Yeah, they were 2
Yeah.
seed.
Yeah, he had a group that was pretty good for.
They lost to a
couple years.
15, but they were a 2 seed.
Mm-hmm.
But
And then
yeah,
Notre
no,
Dame. Notre Dame's the other big one that will probably affect the Big Ten more.
Yes,
Yeah,
I would
that's-
agree
feels
there.
like the one if
I wouldn't be
that
surprised.
might go
if
after
people-
Shrewsbury.
Yeah, I think Shrewsbury. I mean, I think they'd love to have Holtman. And then I think Porter Moser is also another guy they'll look hard at.
I thought I
but-
heard he already said he didn't. He wouldn't.
Did he? I hadn't
he
heard
wasn't going
that.
anywhere.
Okay,
I might
hadn't
be
heard
wrong.
that.
I might be wrong about that.
But yeah, I could see that. Chris Collins, maybe. Although I would.
Northwestern needs to pay him.
Yeah, I wasn't. But here's the thing about paying him though, is like he had a good year a couple years ago, and you were like, oh, it looks like they're coming up. Then they went back down.
Dude, if I were Collins, I would leave. I mean,
I would
that's
too.
like the Buzz
I would-
Williams scenario.
I would jump as fast.
This is
as I
the best
could
it's
and
ever
get
going to get for Chris
Yep.
Collins.
That is
This
what
is
I was.
it,
That's
man.
what I was trying to say. Is that like if I mean I think that if Northwestern pays him, but and you're Northwestern, so you're okay with that. But if I'm another school trying to poach him, I'm very wary of his track record. He's got 2 senior guards who have been around forever and are the best backcourt in the Big Ten this year, probably. And he won 12 games, which is not bad. This was a tough Big Ten.
Yeah, but he's now done it twice at Northwestern. Like, give him
true.
a school
No, and that's the other side of
that's
the
more
argument.
comparable to the other schools in his conference.
That's the other side of the argument is, well, he's gotten them this high before. The other argument is all those other years, he needed this specific group, I think, to fit his system, play system. And when's he
But
gonna
that's
get
how
that
it's going to
again?
be. It's like Indiana in football.
Agreed.
You know, it's like
Agreed.
you build
It's
up
gotta
for a
be-
good
it's gotta line
season,
up
and then you
perfect.
got to reset a little bit.
No, I'm
Yeah.
just saying there's 2 sides of the same argument. And
Yeah.
part of the argument is not just hiring them and convincing, but it's selling it to your boosters and fans. And if you're selling a guy with that record, it's going to be hard sell because you say, well, he went 12-8 in the conference. That's it. You know, it's not like he won
No, it's
15
true.
games. So it's the selling.
Shrewsbury would be, much more fun to sell for Notre Dame.
I would
than
agree with you
Collins.
because he took, because Penn State is, again, although, he walked into a not horrible situation there comparably, but I don't know.
He's more of
So-
a blank slate, and he's
Yes,
got a more
I
fun
would agree with that.
backstory.
And he's got the Celtics backstory, and so yeah, no,
Coach
it's
Sony
just
on the
interesting.
side.
I just think
You
in
can
terms
make
of what
arguments
he's-
both ways.
Yeah, I think in terms of what he's been able to do with kind of taking over a pretty barren roster
Yes.
and fairly quickly turning it around. I mean, I think that's what you need to do there versus, and this is probably just having a larger sample size of what Collins is, but it feels like with him, a lot of things need to be exactly right or in a really good spot in order for him to succeed, as opposed to, and maybe that's not giving him enough credit. That's certainly conceivable that I'm not giving him enough credit for, for what he did with that team. But I do think there's an element of what you said, Ryan, really strong backcourt that has, come together over the course of time. He's certainly responsible for that. But, in a number of the other years when you had those guys, as you were building up to that, you were really not doing much of anything. And,
aside from beating
true.
Indiana a few times.
well, let's not do that. Hey, do you mind if I bail?
You bouncing?
To work on
Go
some-
bounce.
Unless
It's that,
are there
it's
any
that time of year?
Are there any
Oh.
specific questions that are in there that you would want me to answer though? We can do those first if you want. I kind of glanced through. It looked like there was a couple that were.
Yeah, there's
somewhat
one. Okay, so
bracketology
let's hit these off the
Okay.
top, and then we'll get you
You're
out
good. You're good.
Okay, let's go to segment 3 here. Here we go.
It's Ethan Happ, and I never listen to the assembly call, especially the episodes that Ryan is on.
Well, thank you for chiming in with that, Ethan. We always appreciate it. I'm Jared Morris. I'm here with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms. Maybe not. This is our final segment here on Assembly Call Radio this week on the eve of Indiana's opening game in the Big Ten tournament, which we will find out once the show is over, whether it's Minnesota or Maryland. But it's time for our mailbag. A lot of these questions submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community, which you can learn more about at assemblycall.com/community. And we also got some Twitter questions this week as well. But we are going to start out with a couple of bracketology questions for Andy, because this is the busy time for Andy. We need to let him go so he can, focus on his brackets, maybe seeing his family for 5 or 6 minutes at some point, But we know what his priority is. He's got lots of bracket work to do, so we're going to let him get off here so he can do that. And then Ryan and I will answer the rest of these questions. But let's see. Andy, here's the first one from Josiah. It says, for the bracketologists. So, Ryan, this question is definitely not for you and me. In the near impossible event that a really bad power conference team, like Louisville, for example, or maybe Ohio State, did the unthinkable and won their conference tournament's auto bid, what seed would the committee give them? If that were ever to happen, would we actually see a power conference team as a 15 or 16 seed, or would they more likely be a 13 or 14? Louisville as an NCAA tournament team was kind of hilarious.
I mean, that has already, that dream has already died a couple of days ago. It's odd because, like, if you look at the Louisville example, because I think Ohio State's a very different example. They still rank fairly high in the net. I think they'd probably end up as a 12-ish, maybe no lower than a 13.
Yeah, they're 55th in KenPom.
They're
not
still
terrible.
Yeah, they're still like 60 something in the net. And that's before they beat Iowa today. So theirs would be a little bit different. Louisville, I have no idea because they were at like 300th in the net. Now, you would move up by virtue of who you'd have to beat. And if you went through the ACC, obviously the Boston College win notwithstanding, but Purdue would have had, or not Purdue, Louisville would have needed to go through Carolina, Virginia, NC State or Clemson, and then like Duke or Miami to win. So by virtue of that, you'd still end up with more like quality wins than the other teams would have. Now, you can't discount what you did the entire rest of the season, but I would think Louisville, I don't think they'd be a 16, but I do think there could be an argument to be a 15. I don't know how you'd evaluate somebody who had been so god awful the entire season and do that. But there's no way like a Louisville winning that would get to like the 12-13 range. I don't think.
Isn't it? I guess, have you looked? Is this Louisville season worse than the worst Crean season? Is it worse than his first season? Because that team, would they go 6-25, which is more wins than Louisville got.
Yeah, I don't know. You'd have to go back and look a little bit at like who they actually beat. Louisville beat Clemson,
one of those wins was Chaminade
in the conversation for an NCAA tournament bid. But yeah, it's got to be pretty close to that, though.
Let's see.
Just absolutely
Crean's first
brutal.
team was 209th in KenPom.
Yeah, Louisville is sub 300, so apparently, apparently that was better.
Gosh, that's so bad.
Yeah,
they're 294.
Unbelievable.
So, wow. Okay, I think there's one more question here for you, Andy. From Max. Let's assume that we're locked into a number 4 seed. Out of the likely 5 seeds, who would you most or least want to play in the round of 32? How about the same for the 1 seeds if we were to reach the Sweet 16? You kind of addressed this earlier, or at least the 5 seed part.
The 5 seeds are interesting. I think, and I don't think you'd mind playing whatever Big 12 team is there if it's an Iowa State or a TCU. I think TCU is really good, but they've got some guys that are a little banged up at this point. Iowa State's been
Didn't one of their guys just leave the team too? Accusing Jamie Dixon of like saying some racial thing.
Oh, I heard one of their players left the team. I did not necessarily hear the backstory to it. So
there's some
could very
crazy
well be.
Backstory to it.
Oh, well, that seems good. So maybe them then. Iowa State's just, they're good defensively. That would be a grinder. That would be much like a Big Ten game, quite honestly. I would say with them, St. Mary's, I think everybody would probably be a little bit scared off of that. San Diego State, I wouldn't mind. I think Miami might be the one I'd least like to play of the 5s, just because I think they've got good guards. They've got a big guy that can step out and shoot it a little bit. So I guess I'll say them of the ones that are in that general range now.
And look, Indiana hasn't lost to a team ranked worse than 49th all season. They took care of business against the bad team. So I think a lot of us fairly feel like Indiana can handle their first round matchup. last question for you. Are there any of those teams that are at the 13 line that you think stylistically presents a particular challenge for Indiana?
I will be honest and say I don't know that I've watched enough of some of them play to have a great feel for that. Toledo is the best of those, I would say, at this point. Utah Valley is interesting. I believe that's a school that I think Mark Madsen is the coach of. I want to say. I'll look that.
Mark Madsen.
I'll look that up real quick.
Does he dance after victories?
That's unclear. They did win the WAC, so maybe he did. I'm not sure, but I think he's an up and coming coach, so maybe there's something to be said for that. But yeah, of the ones that are there, I think Toledo's, and they may not win the MAC. It could be Kent State, who's pretty good there as well. But the other 13s right now are Utah Valley, Yale, and Iona. So you could have a Patino matchup there. They got off to a little bit of a slow start, but they played well lately. So
I'd like to stay away from Rick Pitino in the NCAA tournament.
I think that's reasonable. And the 1 seed part of the question, I mean, tough to say. You're not really. If I use a 4, they won't get put in the same region as Purdue. Kansas, we've kind of seen how that played out. Does not feel like that's one you'd want to go back to the well on. So
although with a healthy Jalen and Trace, I think that game goes differently.
I don't.
Maybe, but I don't know. And then so that leaves you with Alabama and Houston. Yeah, Alabama's struggled in since some of the news coming out about them. They've not played as well since then. They're somewhat high variance in terms of the way they can shoot it really well at times, turn the ball over a lot at other times, shoot it really poorly at times, versus the Houston is going to be an absolute grinder in terms of how they play defensively, and
we're getting put in Houston's region. It's inevitable. It's going to happen.
I'm mentally preparing myself for it.
Yeah. So
then
they're really, really good. So I guess
we always end up talking about Samson at the end of every show anyway. It's always there in the chat mob at the very end of the show. Somehow we end up talking about Samson. So let's just have an actual game where we play his team.
Have at it. Yeah. So I'd probably say Alabama, I guess, based on the way they're playing right now. But
all right.
I mean, they're 1 seeds for a reason. There's not like there's an ideal, an ideal matchup against one of the teams who has one of the top 4 resumes in the country. It's not like, oh yeah, this team's terrible. We should definitely play them. So,
hey, we're 2-1 against potential 1 seed. So that's not.
There you go.
Not terrible.
There you go. Absolutely.
All right, Andy. Thanks for being here, man. We appreciate it. Go work on the brackets and stuff, and we'll talk to you tomorrow and Saturday.
All right. Sounds good. We'll see you guys.
Cool. See you, man. All right, Ryan, let's go to some of these other questions.
All
and
right.
we will go to Twitter, where we put out a call for the random and ridiculous question of the week, and we got a few that I think are worth answering. And we'll start with Sean HQ, who says, who is the most famous person in Ryan's phone?
Oh, man.
I'm assuming he means other than Andy Bottoms, because
I was going to say,
Andy is the most famous and beloved person in your phone. We know that.
Somebody who's not on this show.
Someone who's not a world famous bracketologist.
Let me scan. Who's yours while I look? Because I'm looking right now.
Well, mine is you, obviously, because you're in my phone.
It's very nice of you to say.
Let's see. Who's the most famous person? I don't have that many. Tony Adrania. He's pretty famous.
He's pretty famous.
From IU Film Room.
That's not bad. Okay. I've got a couple. Do you want me to just... I mean, because I don't know...
Max Bielfeldt. He's in my phone.
That's a good one. Okay. Tiki Barber.
Tiki Barber?
Yeah.
Really?
Tiki Barber's in there. Jay Billis, of course.
Yeah,
Fan of the show.
We knew you were going to name drop Jay Billis. That's
Always
okay.
do. Let me see.
Ooh, John Crispin.
That's a good one. Let's see. Yeah, I'd say Tiki Barber's probably number one. I've got some radio guys who I don't think are not everybody would know. Tiki was an NFL guy, so everybody knows him.
Has his Hall of Fame case come up, by the way?
Yes. His brother's already in.
Tiki didn't make it, though, did he?
No, not yet. I don't think so. Wait,
he's not going to make it, is he?
He was one of those guys where they were like, it took 4 seasons and examined them, he's probably in, but yeah, he not for his whole career. Like he has 4. If you took a 4-season sample, you'd be like, that guy's definitely going to be in the Hall of Fame. And then if you take his whole career, no.
Hold on. Shit, did I just flash that up there? I'm gonna have to edit this video.
I don't think you got the number. Just
okay.
You definitely shouldn't have done that, though. I think Greg's going to be very upset at you.
That's right. I'm gonna go in and edit the video.
Go to the next question. I'll see if I can find, because I've got like 4,000 numbers.
Yeah, sorry guys. He's just got so many numbers in his phone. It's really just hard to go
I'm the
through
kind of
these
person who still has everybody from college in his phone still, so I'm having to go through these line by line.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna go.
You might want to go back and edit that thing out.
I'll go delete it. I didn't realize it was on the screen.
That was a really bad idea.
Okay. It was, but
go to the next question.
I trust our live viewers here to be able to handle that responsibly.
Okay.
Okay. Master Knight says, if you could choose a sponsor to sponsor the Back Home Network, who would it be and why?
Home Field Apparel.
Home Field Apparel, wear one for the team.
I mean, come on, legitimately.
Okay. Other than them,
okay.
Knicks. Come on now.
What, the bar?
Yeah, Knicks.
Okay.
Where else would I be talking about?
I don't know if that qualifies as like a famous person. Who's the most famous person in Ryan's phone?
Oh, I thought it was like sponsor. Gosh, I don't know.
Jen. So how was the assembly call this week? Oh, we spent 20 minutes watching Jared and Ryan play on their phones.
Yeah, it's been a good show.
Okay, it has been a good show.
Keep going.
Okay, from Scott. I thought this was a really interesting question.
Okay.
Who will be Indiana's final opponent this season?
I'm going to be real optimistic. Kansas.
Really?
Yeah. Kansas.
And where do you think that game?
I'm not saying.
Then that's
not
gotta be
the question, Jared.
Well, no, but who will Indiana's? Okay, but how are you going to get there? So are you saying that's probably a Sweet 16 game, or do you think it's in the Final Four?
Pass. I'm not saying where. I'm not saying where, because I don't want to make a prediction like that because we haven't even seen what the bracket looks like. But if I'm going to say it right now, I'll say Kansas. There's something about that game and the way things might line up. They're going to have another shot at Kansas at some point. That's the way I feel.
Our buddy IU Artifact says Houston. Which
that was my second.
Kind of how I feel.
That was my second.
How I feel like it's going to go.
Yeah, that was my second.
Don't get me wrong. I think we're good enough to beat Houston. I mean, I think this Indiana team can beat anybody on a neutral floor, honestly. My concern is more just the consistency. Can we win enough games in a row? But I think we can beat anybody in a single game scenario.
True.
All right, let's keep going here. From Richard, the Big Ten tournament often is not an indicator of how a team performs in March Madness. Having said that, what things are you looking for in individual players and overall team outcomes to serve as a barometer for where this team is physically and mentally? It's an interesting question.
I'm sorry, you cut out for 1 second for me.
Basically, what are you looking for in these Big Ten tournament games from individual players or the team overall to serve as a barometer for where the team is?
I want the role
heading into the
players
NCAAs
to step up and play well. That's the key for me. It's not about Jalen or Trace, because those guys can play really well and Indiana can lose. It's about, I want to see Miller hit some threes. I want to see Trey Galloway play like Trey Galloway. I'd like to see, Tamar Bates hit a couple of shots and look more comfortable as he did at the end of the season. Those are the keys to me. That's what I'm watching. Even if they don't win the tournament, that's what I want to see is more consistent play out of those guys. Because even Trey, who you think of as consistent, had up and down games. I mean, we think back to the positive stuff, but he had up and down games.
Yeah, but was much more consistent than he's been. He took a huge step forward. Yeah, I think Scoop is really important. I thought the minutes he provided. I know, for better or worse. And I thought the minutes he provided against Michigan were huge. And I will say this about him, because I think our hypothesis all season long is he's probably a guy who needs more minutes to get in a rhythm, but he's not going to find the minutes on this team until he can produce with the smaller minutes that he gets, right? So it's like this catch-22. And against Michigan, he got the extended time because Trey fouled out. And so, does that kind of help him, give him some confidence coming in? Because he could change the complexion of things. If he can come in and give you 8 to 10 points a game, that is huge for this team. So, I'm not predicting it because we've seen a lot of ups and downs from him, but, I believe in the ability that's there for him to do it. And so hopefully he's able to, because that would really be huge for Indiana. While Ryan continues to look through his phone, let's see. Jared asks us, not me, another Jared from our community, why does there seem to be chatter that X may enter the transfer portal? Any truth to this? What about the transfer from Harvard that we have reached out to, as well as almost every major program in the country? What are your thoughts on him? So a couple things on X. I haven't heard anything about him going into the transfer portal. I guess nothing would shock me if he wanted to explore his options, but I think overwhelmingly it makes more sense for him to come back to Indiana. So I'm not going to worry about that until there's a reason to. As for the guy from Harvard, Ledlum, he's an interesting player. I think we're all really focused right now on, the games and this season. And it's kind of annoying that they open up the transfer portal now. And, I get it. I mean, guys need to be able to put their name in and start getting options. I don't want to think about that stuff right now. I want to think about the games and the tournament. So we're going to have to. And so we'll talk about it, when we get opportunities like this on Assembly Call Radio. I think the Ledlum guy is interesting. Most people, Ryan, have you watched much of him yet? Have
Not
you looked
really
into him
yet.
at all?
I was planning to do it after the tournament. Basically, I haven't really.
He's the one guy I have. He's a 6'6" guy. He's well built. Like, he's a thick dude. He's not a great outside shooter. He shot 29%, but he can really drive. He can get to the basket. He can score around the rim. Tough guy, good leader. He's a good defensive player. Like, he's got a block percentage and a steal percentage that are both above 2.5. And it's really funny. When I first watched clips of him, I thought, this is Race Thompson, but a little bit better off the bounce. Now, it was all highlights of his offense, so I don't know how good he was defensively, but you see those numbers, and that's kind of comparable to what Race does. He just has a little bit of a higher block percentage. But that's the kind of guy that he is. He's very Race Thompson-like. And there were 3 other people that I'm in like a chat with that brought that up independently. Oh, it kind of reminds me of Race Thompson a little bit. And I can see why that would be attractive to this coaching staff, given how much they love Race Thompson. That's a guy that helps you win games. So I know the concern about the shooting and can he and Malik Renew play together and all of this stuff. And I certainly get that. But also Indiana needs more guys who can pressure the rim and get to the basket and create shots that way. And he does provide that skill. So I think he's interesting is what I'm saying.
I'll take a look at him. I haven't given it the chance just because we're so focused on this stuff. So
and I haven't dove in enough. I've just looked at his numbers and some offensive highlights, which is not enough to give a full scouting report, but it's enough to say I'm interested. And I think just that profile of being Race Thompson-like, well, we're going to need a guy who's Race Thompson-like because Race Thompson's graduating, and he's been very valuable for this program. So that part is at least interesting. From Patrick, given that we are not a bubble team this year, and he said to play the holy music. There we go. Not a bubble team this year, and potential 3 games in 3 days. Do you think Coach Woodson tries to get TJD and Jalen closer to 30 minutes than 40, giving Bates, Banks, and Geronimo extra minutes and Renew more time to get comfortable? Or do you think Coach Woodson subs like he has done the last few months? What would you do if it was your decision? It doesn't matter. Well, we can talk about what we would do if it was our decision. Mike Woodson is there to win a tournament. Yep. He's made that very clear, and I think he is going to coach. I think he's going to coach every one of these games like he's coached the rest of them. I don't think he's worried about saving guys for the tournament because I just think in his mind he thinks these guys should be able to play these minutes.
Yep.
And there is a certain irony there in that his team in 1980 did seem to kind of run out of gas, and he ran out of gas after coming back from his injury. Not that Jalen or Trace, not that their injuries were that serious at all. But that part of it is interesting anyway. But I think he made it very clear today in his media availability that he's there to win a tournament. And I think, as much as Scott and I talked about this on Crimson Cast, the Big Ten tournament has become a punchline for Indiana fans for good reasons and not so good reasons. But at the end of the day, like the really good teams in this conference, they've all won one of these, they've all done at some point, you need to actually do something in it if they're going to keep playing it. And it's another one of those monkeys on our back. And Mike kind of addressed this a little bit. And, during his, almost 2 years now at Indiana, that's kind of what he's done, is just toss the monkeys off the back, and a lot of losing streaks and a lot of narratives that we were all annoyed by. And so this is kind of the next one that they can take a step forward from what they did last year to do. So I think he's going to coach to win every game like he's done all season long. I just don't think he knows another way.
Yeah.
I guess the question would be, is that what you would do?
Nope. I would. I'm not saying I would not put them on the floor, but they're not playing 38 to 40 minutes a game, because this isn't the tournament that matters. It'd be nice to win it. It'd be nice. But if you're down 15 with 5 minutes left, take them the hell out of the game. And Mike hasn't done that this year. That has not been his MO, and that's fine. That's the way he coaches. It's his team. He's allowed to do that. Also, I would find spots in the first half to get, if you've got a 10-point lead, rest TJD 3 more minutes than you would, and then have him for the stretch run more. Okay. If you guys have noticed over the 4 years of his career, at the end of games, Trace Jackson Davis has real trouble making free throws. The reason why, he's playing a lot of friggin' minutes, and being tired at the free throw line is not a great recipe. Race Thompson has shot in the 70%, was he about 75% free throw shooter this year, like 74.5 or something.
Dude, he's been like in the high 80s since he returned from his injuries.
And he went 1 for 6 in the game the other night, missing 4 late. That wasn't because he's not a good free throw shooter. It's because he was exhausted. He hadn't played that many minutes since he'd come back. That's a factor late in games, and it's going to be a factor late in tournament games. And so you've got to save as much of their legs as possible. And that's been a bugaboo for Trace throughout his career. The shot flattens out late at games because he's great on the interior, but when you stand at that free throw line, you have to think, and you're tired. It's a lot easier to miss shots. So that's why teams foul late, and they try and foul guys who either played a lot of minutes or haven't played, are the two guys you try and foul, guys who aren't warm and guys who played a lot of minutes. Those are the guys you angle after when you're trying to foul late. And I would say try and sneak in some spots to get them some rest. It's harder with Jalen because he's your primary ball handler. And while try as he might, Trey Galloway just isn't as good at running the offense as Jalen is. So it's harder to do that, honestly. But you've got Malik Renew. You can run him for a little bit. You can cover with keeping Race out there, and then swap it out and rotate the 3 of them kind of in.
You can play Race at the 5.
You can. You absolutely can. I mean, we thought Race, if Trace left,
especially against Maryland or Minnesota, you could definitely play Race at the 5.
So that's where I'm at with it. I would try and steal minutes wherever I can. Again, this tournament, it'd be nice to win it. Doesn't really matter. Indiana's pretty much locked in as a 4 seed, I think, as Andy said, and you'd like to win it. You think you have a chance to win it. You think you have a chance to make a run, but I would not throw all of my eggs in this basket.
Yeah. By the way, back to the previous question about Ledlum from Harvard. I saw Evan in the chat said, I was hoping more Dante Scott than Race Thompson. Dante Scott is probably a better comparison, at least based on what I've seen. Because like I said, he's this Ledlum guy is kind of like Race Thompson, but with the ability to drive. Race Thompson isn't really driving people. He's more backing people down. But you very rarely see Race Thompson take people off the dribble and score. And this guy can. Actually, looking at his numbers, Dante Scott shoots 29% from 3, 51% from 2. He's a good free throw shooter, disruptive defender with good block and steal percentages. He's actually probably a better comp than Race Thompson. So that was a good one, Evan. And we'll see. Apparently the Indiana coaches have a lot of interest. And look, I think this is where a guy like Jordan Hulls really is going to be put to work. Because Ryan, what's happening right now is Indiana's playing in the Big Ten tournament and then the NCAA tournament. The assistant coaches have to be extremely focused on scouting. They've had to have scouting reports for Nebraska, Minnesota, and Maryland, which means each assistant coach took one of those. And obviously the head coach is completely focused on the next game. But what's happening meanwhile, guys are going into the transfer portal. And this is a huge offseason for Indiana when it comes to the transfer portal. So your recruiting coordinator and some of those support staff members have to be on top of this, because you can't just punt transfer conversations until you're out of the NCAA tournament.
Because everybody else
miss on some good guys. So this is a really, really important kind of stretch of season, for some of those support staff members, to be able to basically, you got to be prepared. You got to know who's likely to come out, who you like if they do come out. And then basically, if you're going to put this in front of the head coach because he needs to look at a guy or a guy needs to take a visit, you better be real sure that the guy is worth it.
I'll say this. Coaches know who's going to be in the transfer portal. I mean, they have a good idea of who's.
But part of that is the support staff members doing the homework.
Sure,
because Woody's not paying attention.
100%.
Woody's not paying attention to who's going to be in there.
But most of these coaches, and I'm talking about the staff, not the head coaches. The coaches know by about mid-January who's going to be there. Now there are
the assistants may have previous relationships with some of these guys too.
That's where I'm getting at, and the people surrounding those players start to put feelers out mid-season. I mean, because very rarely does somebody just shockingly enter the transfer portal. There's always reasons for it. And what they do ahead of time usually is put feelers out there, and schools, again, off the record, behind the scenes, come out and we'd be interested in him. They know schools are going to be interested if you're jumping to the transfer portal, unless you're at a very low-level school. But for the most part, these major conference transfers all know these are your options. You can either stay or you can probably go to one of these. Now, sometimes a team pops up randomly out of nowhere is interest in this guy, or sometimes players who were not planning on transferring all of a sudden transfer. But a lot of these are telegraphed months in advance, and we have been told last summer that this transfer group was going to be loaded because guys were going to give it one more shot at some of these schools and then enter the transfer portal. So, and they know there's a lot of opportunity because this past recruiting class, or this year's recruiting class, is not the best. And, had less development time. And so transfers may be far more popular.
And a lot of incomplete evaluations, which means mismatches between school and player.
Yes.
So, it's going to be active. All right, let's hit a few of these final ones here.
Oh, by the way, number one on the phone, think Drew Brees is number one on the phone, in my phone.
Drew Brees.
Yeah. I would say that is probably number one.
I guess he goes higher than Tiki Barber.
Yeah, I would say so.
But he's a Purdue guy, so that kind of drops him.
Sure, does drop the value down a little bit. I've got Jim Rome, too, for all you West Coasters out there. That's
phenomenal.
That's big out here. Phenomenal. Allegedly.
Mike Woodson was just on with Jim Rome. I didn't.
Was he? I didn't hear it.
I don't think he shattered any new ground or said anything crazy. Trent says Ryan's just flexing on us now.
That's not a flex. He's a Purdue guy. I mean, it's.
And to be fair, Ryan was asked the question. So
yeah, I'm not just throwing that out there. There are some others I will leave off the table because I'm not sure how well liked they'd be around here.
From Matthew, will our NCAA tournament be a boom, second weekend, or a bust, first round loss? So I have a really hard time. This team has not shown us that they will lose to the kind of team that's going to be in the 13 seed. Now, it doesn't mean they can't, but they haven't shown us they'll do that. They've shown us that they can lose to really good teams. So I think Indiana is going to win their first round matchup. I think the 4-5 matchup is going to be very interesting. I have a hard time, based on what we've seen from this team, thinking that we're going to beat two really good teams in a row. So I think the most likely scenario is Indiana wins their first round matchup against the 13 seed. They beat the 5 seed, and then they lose their next game, probably to a 1 seed in the Sweet 16. I think that's the most likely outcome for this team. I think they certainly have it in them to make a deeper run if they can find some level of consistency and get good matchups. And they're obviously capable of losing to a 5 seed level team. But I think just based on the evidence of what they've shown us throughout the year, I think they'll make the Sweet 16.
I will say this. I think Indiana is going to benefit from the officiating in the NCAA tournament, given the way they play, compared to what they get in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
And I will say, if they don't make the second weekend, I think it's a disappointment. With the roster they have, the players they have.
It would be a disappointment.
It would be a pretty big disappointment. No, not a disaster, as you guys love to.
Depends on how you lose. I mean, if it's one of those 20-point just blowout losses, it's like, come on, guys.
Yeah, they got to get to the Sweet 16, man. You got to move. You got to keep advancing the program, and you can't do it one round at a time. You got to get back to the Sweet 16. Tom Crean got to the Sweet 16 twice. Mike Woodson's got it with an All-American and a lottery pick, and some decent role players and a lot of veterans. You got to get to the second weekend. I mean, we said beginning of the season, we can't soften on this. We said beginning of the season, top 4 in the Big Ten. And at least the Sweet 16.
Yeah.
I don't care you're without X. You've been without X a while. This team is now without X. I mean, this team has had a chance.
Okay, but you can't just say that doesn't matter. I mean, you don't have your point guard.
No, it
That
matters.
matters.
But you know what? It's not like you just lost him and you have to recalibrate. You haven't had
No,
him
but
for
you're still
months.
not as good. The gaping
Sure.
hole and the reason. But
guess
here's the
what?
thing.
They should have with X. They should have been aiming higher than the Sweet 16. Quite frankly,
I agree with that. But what I'm saying is the biggest reason why they would probably lose in the second round is lack of backcourt depth, which is exactly the thing that not having X hurts you. So
well, here's
look,
the thing: you're letting them off the hook a little bit by doing that, because you know what? In X's absence, they should have been able to develop some of the guys they have on the roster, CJ Gunn, Tamar Bates, and gotten them into a role where they can play and contribute, not make up for X, but make up some of that, and they haven't. And
okay, well, here's the thing. I'm not letting them off the hook. I think they're going to make the Sweet 16. That's my expectation. I do think it would be a disappointment. I think the problem is it's really hard to put so much on one tournament appearance, right? I mean, we don't know who the 5 seed is going to be. We don't know how that game is going to go. It could be a tough, hard-fought game, and you just happen to lose it, and it's like, damn. But it's a 4-5 game. It's a tough one. What this program needs to do is start making the NCAA tournament year after year after year so you have more opportunities to make a run. So it doesn't feel like there's so much pressure on this year. We have to we have to do this specific thing. Like, I agree. It'll be disappointing if we don't make the Sweet 16. It'll feel like there was potential unfulfilled. But I think we kind of need to see how it plays out before we judge it too harshly beforehand. It's the NCAA tournament. We know
on the surface, I would say if you don't make the Sweet 16, it's a disappointment. If you're seated in the top 16,
yes, it's
and
a
you don't
disappointment.
make the Sweet 16, it's a disappointment.
No,
now,
I agree. I agree that it's a disappointment.
It could be this, it could be this, whatever. But in general, the goals of this that we set out for this team, top 4 in the Big Ten, at least the Sweet 16. We even said maybe the Elite 8.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, India's got to make a second weekend of a tournament. I mean, for a while it was they got to make the tournament. But now you've got a great team. And by the way, if you're looking at the way this lines up for next year, it's hard to see them making the Sweet 16 next year. You got to do it now. So,
I agree with the sense of urgency. I agree with the sense of urgency. I agree with all of that. I will be disappointed if they don't make it. To me, again, that's what this team has shown us. They're a Sweet 16 level team. It's hard for me to see beyond that because they'd have to show a level of consistency that they haven't shown. But what they've shown us is
the role players.
They'll take care of business against a lower team, and they can beat a good team, but they haven't in a while. They haven't beaten 2 good teams in a row. Even that win streak of 5, they were playing Wisconsin at home, who's not very good, and I think Minnesota was in there. So we'll see. But I do agree. If we're going to go with the word disappointing, if they don't make the Sweet 16, I would agree with that. I think that would be a disappointment. It wouldn't be a failure. I don't think it would mean that this season wasn't a step forward because the context matters, but it would be a disappointment.
Yes, I agree.
This is a fun question from Carrie. I have a question concerning shot mechanics with the 3-ball. Well, hey, we have a shot doctor here. It may just be me, but when I watch our guys shoot, it looks awkward, forced, and mechanical. When I watch other team shooters, it looks so much more fluid, smooth, and rhythmical. Ours looks like no chance, and theirs looks like money. Can this motion be improved upon, or are we just at the mercy of lady luck?
No, it can be improved upon with coaching. You see, Trey Galloway's motion is completely changed from last year to this year. I mean, it's not 100% a change. It's a shift. And that's why he's making them this year. It still doesn't look natural or smooth. I would say that. Miller Kopp, I think he's got a good motion. I think his body rotates a lot more than I would have a shooter do that. But if you shoot
just a bit of a long setup.
It is. I don't, with him being 6'7", I understand how he was able to get away with a long setup from that's the thing. People don't realize Miller's a big dude. And so he's been able to get away with it, I think, for a long time. But more athletic guys closing out, he tends to pump fake and try and reset. But his motion, up until the release is fine, but he does over rotate his body a lot. You'll see he's kind of angled with his shoulder facing the hoop. Some guys do that. Some guys don't. Scoop his feet are kind of a mess when he shoots, but he's got a great release and rotation. It looks very natural and smooth. His feet are not how I would set up, but it's been working for him. And when something's working, you don't change it. You don't tell a guy to change it. And this year it's worked for him. So the motions all have their own little bugaboos. There is not other than Miller, there is not a pure shooter on this team that has the perfect mechanics, perfect release, perfect rotation, all of that, and a great setup with his legs and upper half combined together. So I would agree in principle with what you're saying, but I don't think it really. I would say Jalen shot on the pull up from inside looks smooth and perfect. His 3-point shot still looks a little forced. And the funny thing is about that is because Jalen off the dribble on 3, I think looks better than he does catch and shoot. And the funny thing,
do you think part of that is because his shot is a little flat, and so when he's off the dribble, he elevates a little more?
Absolutely. And again, that's going to be a thing that he looks way better than he did in high school from deep. You can see it in high school. He loved to pull up, and we talked about that. It's impressive that he's able to do that. But I would say that, I think that his shot's a little flat from deep. And so when he comes off the pull up, he looks a lot smoother than when he's catch and shoot.
I like CJ's shot. I think he gets good elevation on it.
He's overshooting.
Yeah. It's almost like
he's rushing.
Yeah. He's just been too juiced up when he's gotten in there, but
I
think
his one this season.
I think he's 2 for 24, 2 for 25, something like that.
Yeah.
But I still think that he projects to be a good shooter. Yeah.
His is not, it's not mechanical with him. It's mental. And he's
now,
rushing.
If it doesn't take a big jump next year, I'll start to get a little bit worried.
Yes.
Although we just saw Trey Galloway make a big jump after his second season, but I think you like to see that really come around in a guy's second
with CJ,
year.
The difference between CJ and Trey is Trey can finish around the rim and get stuff off the dribble, and his energy gets you stuff offensively with the ball. CJ doesn't project as that type of player, so the shooting is that much more important. Although we did say if Trey Galloway made 30% of his threes, it was a huge change for Indiana, a huge game changer for Indiana, and that's been the case this year.
Yep. Last question. How far will a Big Ten team go in the men's NCAA tournament? Who do you think it will be? So I guess which Big Ten team will go the farthest, I think is the question.
I will say I like the way Michigan State plays in it for a tournament setting.
Yep.
I really do like the way they play for a tournament setting, and they've got guards who can go off. They've got Sissoko, who I think hasn't peaked at all this year.
Yeah.
So I like the way they line up. I don't think
they don't have a great seed, so they're going to have to. It's going to be a tough battle for them.
But they're going to be a team that like a 2 seed doesn't want to face.
No,
I think because you just get beat up.
No, you do not want to face them.
I don't think it's Purdue at all. I think people have figured out if you shut down their freshman guards, they really struggle, and Edey's going to get his, and that's it. It's not Northwestern. I think in the tournament, especially the first 2 rounds, it's real tough for guards to shoot as well as they need to make out of it, to get out of it, because it's not a comfortable situation.
Sure as hell don't trust Iowa in the tournament.
No. Their offense, their lack of defense is a killer.
No, I think it's Michigan State or Indiana. I would put honestly
Michigan State, and I'm considering other than Indiana because I think Indiana can make a run. They've got two alpha dogs and role players that should be able to fill it. I mean, if I had to line them all up against each other, I would say Indiana has the best chance. But other than that, I'd say Michigan State. I love the way that they're constructed for a tournament setting. I don't think they're a regular season team. I think they're a tournament team.
Yep. All right. Any final thoughts, Ryan? Before we pack up here,
let's get a win tomorrow. Come on.
We need to.
Come on.
I know. Like, we don't need to go win the Big Ten tournament, but I do think we need to win tomorrow. You know, it's confidence. It kind of keeps the momentum from the regular season. If you win tomorrow and then you lose Saturday, fine, whatever. Now let's go focus on the NCAA tournament. I do think winning tomorrow is really important.
I'll say this. Would you rather go out in the semifinals or the final?
Like
from
if you're
sanity,
telling,
if you're,
I mean, I always want to win games. Yeah, I think there's value in winning games.
Like I get the lack of disappointment if you go out in the semifinals. You're like, well, it's Indiana in the Big Ten tournament. I
don't care about the disappointment thing. I was only thinking about the extra wear and tear before the NCAA tournament. That's the only reason I would even think about it. But I think it's still. I mean, even making a Big Ten tournament championship game is a step forward for this program.
Who did we? I don't even remember. Who did we lose to last year?
Oh, come on, man.
I remember the wins.
Seriously?
I don't
The
remember
jackass
everything.
from Iowa banking
Oh
in
my
the three-pointer.
God, that's right. Why did I thought that was the year before? Oh man.
I mean, he did it the year before too, but it was
Yeah.
just in a regular season game.
No, you're right. No, I thought I was putting that the year before. Total 100%. Totally. I forgot that. Oh my God. I'm really sad. Sorry I brought that up, everybody. I apologize.
I am so tired of Iowa. I'm really tired of Iowa.
I mean,
Just
the
in
state,
all
not
facets.
just the basketball team, just the state. In
Everything.
general.
Everything. I'm really tired of Iowa. You got Kathy, Amos, and Sean up there in Iowa. They're great.
Kathy hates
Everything else in Iowa, I think I could do without. I really
Yeah.
do. I think I could do without.
I spent a decent chunk of time there. Dated a girl who lived in Iowa.
Oh,
No.
I got a lot of my
No.
dad's family is in Iowa.
Not
too,
a whole
so
lot
I do have family
redeemable
up there.
about that state for me.
David says I dislike Iowa more than Purdue. Wouldn't quite go that
I
far.
wouldn't go that
but,
far.
But Iowa, it's funny. Like Big Ten teams, they kind of pop up, as being kind of more annoying or bigger rivals. I do feel like Iowa is kind of at their peak in terms of Indiana fans hating them right now.
Yeah, I would agree.
Screw Iowa.
Done with Iowa.
Done with Iowa. All right, and we're also done with this episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. We'd like to thank Bob Thompson for producing our music. Thank you to John Ringer of rigdesign.com for designing our logos. And as always, thank you for listening. We will be back tomorrow night after Indiana plays either Maryland or Minnesota for the postgame show. Until then,
take it from me, Jennifer Crabtree. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers!
that is our audience member, Jen Crabtree. Longtime listener. We were emailing back and forth, and I said, you know what? Would you record the elbows in outro? So I think we're going to start having some audience members record it, and we'll rotate those in too. So Jen was the first. We appreciate that, Jen. I thought she did an awesome job. No what?
No swearing, guys, when you get asked to do it. Keep your effing elbows in and
I mean, if you want to.
I'm not allowed to swear. You can't swear. Maryland's up 11 right now, or 9. Wow.
Right, so they'll probably win.
Minnesota already has 3 guys with 4 fouls. And
how much time is left?
14 minutes left in the second half.
Yeah, Maryland's going to win. That's all right. Bring on Maryland. I like the matchup against Maryland when we're not in their place.
Yeah.
So let's go. I know I'm going to be here. Coach Marlowe will be here, and we're hoping Ryan is here.
Yes.
But he might be in traffic.
I might be.
It happens.
Sadly,
all right, everybody.
It does in Southern California.
It does. It does. All right, everybody. We will see you all tomorrow.
Later, guys.
Take care.